Yep. Mm-hmm.
So to switch gears a little bit, like Sandy usually says.
She always is moving on. My last story got long-winded and she cut in. I never finished it. So it's all right, go ahead. No, I don't remember what it was. It's good. Yeah.
So when we saw a lot of your projects, it got me really interested in doing a lot of internet searches and all the different shows. I think I've watched everything that had to do with pools and lazy rivers on there, and I'm thinking a lot of them were just so cookie cutter and the same process, not a lot of artistic differences. There's some really neat ones, cool ones. Yeah. I think the coolest ones were we used cement with art and sculptures to make them look real instead of trying to bring big boulders in all the time.
Sometimes that works, but sometimes it gets way too hodgy-podgy. When you just try to pile stuff up, it doesn't look natural. And that's where having learned concrete so long ago, carving concrete, helps, because then you can blend it together as well. Sometimes you use natural, sometimes you use carving. And what you find on the internet mostly though is those videos or those pictures are afterthoughts. Someone wasn't thinking ahead of time, let's video this and make sure that we comprehend, help get someone to understand. Usually it's an afterthought. And that's where it's become part of our everyday is we don't want anything to be an afterthought. We want to have it filmed raw and original. We can polish it up, but we don't want to pretend like it's anything other than it is, but we're doing it on the front side. So same with going to the show. Here we are at the airport on the way, and the film camera comes out and you start talking. But what it's done is it's allowed us to capture a lot of information that you wouldn't normally get on a typical video.
Yeah. Well, a lot of it is shows that are shot, and I'm sure there's a lot of retakes, and then pre-planning and what you're going to say and what the next person's going to say.
Yeah, that's the biggest challenge.
And then the drama, the big thing that goes wrong.
Yeah, and we've had that discussion a little bit.
And it gets solved in 2 minutes.
I know. Yeah, like in a 45-minute show, they go from nothing in the yard to, wow, the pool company is the greatest thing in the world. And while that's entertaining, and our society kind of likes that because they like sound bites. They like short snippets of everything, and building something from nothing to amazing in an hour is like believable to them. That's not how any of us operate. At the core, that's not how we operate. We don't solve things in 3-minute intervals. But TV shows conditioned us to that. Think about it. Think about every crime show, every whatever. It goes up like this, and they figure it out at the end. And the reality is, 6 months went by. Instead of the actor walking down the road 3 times, he walked down that road 8,000 times. But we live in those 1-hour sound bites.
So I've been almost daily, every 3 days, search and see what new you have on YouTube videos. And I know you and Sandy like to talk in the abstract. So you have to read between the lines about certain things, like this project, for example.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, okay, what are they really talking about?
Well, we have to, because we have to extend it. It's going to take a while. So we could just blurt it all out now.
Put a little candy out there.
You have to tease. I mean, that's the nature of the game. You have to tease with what you're doing. You have to tease conceptually. Because if I can't keep you looking for me, you're not going to come back. But if I can keep you looking, you're likely to come back and listen again. And while it's not like we do that all the time, but we think like that, is that there's so much more. Everyone lives on the surface of life. Everyone just talks about the material, or they talk about the basic of what they've seen. But what's been happening to me, and it's like this year has been crazy, is I've recognized, like I told you guys when you were at the steampunk, how like Louis L'Amour had such a huge impact, a Western writer, had a huge impact on how I work and how I think. But we went on our way to Atlantic City, we went to a museum in Pittsburgh. We stopped at a museum, and we walked through the land of make-believe, Mr. Rogers. There's a private collection in one of the museums there of one of the collectors had gotten, he didn't have the whole thing, but he had a lot of pieces of the Mr. Rogers neighborhood. Well, that's her thing. Like she would describe to us that she would, that when she would go to sleep at night as a kid, she wished she could wake up on Sesame Street or in the land of make-believe. Well, all of a sudden we're there, and you're witnessing these pieces that fundamentally helped you become the person you are. Like her, she lives in what's called Sandyland now. So our space, like our office, that's Sandyland. That's living in the world of make-believe all the time.
The yummy zone?
It is absolutely, it's the yummiest zone. It's living in the yummy. But without recognizing that, if you never talk about it, you never realize where the influence came from.
Yeah.
But sitting here with my brother-in-law Mike last night, I shared with him two separate things that have fundamentally changed me as a human being. And this was young because I was like 8 when he started dating my sister. The first thing was, he was always willing to try anything. Like, I couldn't believe that you could take a 2x6 and turn it into patio furniture. And I watched him as this little kid turning 2x6s to make extra money in the winter because he didn't have work. He took old 2x6s and cut them up and made lawn chairs and stuff out of them. I was blown away. Lawn chairs come from a store,
Right.
you know, in my mind as an 8-year-old kid. But then the second thing, and the more important thing that he shared with me when I was young, was mind over matter. You know, he always talked about, because he had been through, he grew up in the inner city of Detroit. He's just a tough kid, rough and tumble kid, spent a couple tours in Vietnam, got shot down in a helicopter, you know, just his story unfolded. Well, then he stayed with the military and he got involved in a lot of like super secret type of things, which are all very much your mind. You have to stay so sharp in your mind. But he would tell me these stories about and reiterate to me as a little boy and then becoming a growing man of how important the mind is, that the body follows the mind. It's always mind over matter. Like, I would see him go, he's had more health challenges than anybody, and he'll outlive all of us. Like, I could list a laundry list of things this long that have happened to him that should have killed him and never have, but because he's mentally so strong. Well, I learned as a really young man how my mind and my mindset will always get me through anything, and it always has. It doesn't matter what it is. But it wasn't until yesterday that I really recognized it was his specific influence on me, because I always loved positive thinking, and I loved Zig Ziglar and motivational speakers, which they were giving me fluff and they were giving me good sound bites, but those real pieces, those nuggets, were guys like Mike going, your mind can control your body, that you can get through anything, that you can heal anything, you can fix anything, you can whatever. Well, that's who I am today as a man because of that. Well, fortunately, we get to live like that we can have those conversations, and that's why a video isn't ever really super straight clear, is we're playing in our minds as we're talking. There's a guy out right now, he's been a huge controversy, blew up on the internet, Jordan Peterson. I don't know if you've heard of Jordan Peterson or not. Well worth watching his stuff. He's a professor at the University of Toronto, a psychologist. He had a private practice, and he was a professor. And he had written a book many years ago, like a super deep, heavy book, which it's called Maps of Meaning, and it's like way too heavy for me. My brain's too small for that. But he then wrote a second book, and he decided to go on tour and talk about that book. And this thing just blew up on the internet, and he's like the man's man for all these young men today. He talks about men standing up and being men, and he's kind of controversial, but he went on the speaking tour, and he just has this huge influence on people today. But had we not listened to him or talked about him, or what parts would we have missed out in our lives? So that is why then things like, we've always continued to grow as a human. Sandy and I both went and got trained and certified as life coaches. Okay. So we have that in our back pocket as being able to help people. So it comes down to me building a pool, but I'm building a life, not just a pool. Yeah. It's not just concrete and stone. It's living in the yummy part of life every single day in any way that we can, and surrounding yourself with people that you love, and being able, and I'm really fortunate. Most people just don't get that opportunity, and fortunately I've been able to somehow, I'm not smart, but somehow I stumbled my way into happiness, into being able to be around those that I love all the time, and they still love me, and it's kind of a cool thing, but we get to build that way. So